A very good evening all. I'm Aditi Lama with the Tuesday night edition of South Asian News. Welcome to Vision of Asia, voice of our community. We are coming to you from our studio in New York City. Here is what's happening tonight in the coronavirus pandemic. More than 1 million deaths from the novel virus globally, with tonight more than 38 million cases. With a sobering number of 215,000 deaths, the United States currently has 7.8 million cases. Across the country, 33 states have reported more COVID-19 cases in the past week than the week earlier. 16 states are second records for new cases, led by North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Wisconsin, the state where a field hospital is opening this week to handle the great surge of cases overwhelming the hospitals. Experts fear for a devastating winter if these surges aren't controlled. On President Trump's health, White House physician Sean Conley said that the president has tested negative for the virus on consecutive days. This is happening while we are only 21 days away from the presidential elections on November 3rd, and President Trump is scheduled to hold another rally this evening in Pennsylvania. On these elections, more than 10 million Americans have already casted their votes, significantly outpacing the early vote in 2016 and suggests a larger turnout this year. Another reminder here to make sure and cast your vote, your voice this election. Much is on the line with issues such as immigration, racial justice, women's rights, and more. So make sure to vote if you are eligible. And on SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States today saw an all-day Senate Judiciary Committee in its second day of confirmation hearing for President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, post the passing away of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Senators are questioning Amy Barrett today and tomorrow with issues such as healthcare and abortion. What, according to you, should be considered with this hearing, and do you believe that a justice should be confirmed before November 3rd elections? Write to us with your opinion on events at itvgold.com. Also calling all frontliners to share your experience with us on COVID-19. With that, it's time to now start tonight's South Asian News segment. Here are the headlines. Dr. Tushar Patel on surging COVID-19 cases, updates and measures, New Jersey. Indian American Muslim Council protests demanding justice in Hathras rape and murder case, New Jersey. Newsmakers briefing on the state of refugees resettlement and asylum in the U.S. International Refugee Assistance Project. Time for a short break on Vision of Asia, voice of the community. We'll be right back. And welcome back. I'm Aditi Lama and this is Vision of Asia, Tuesday night episode of South Asian News. Looking at the coronavirus updates and measures, cases are surging across 33 U.S. states, with 16 setting records for new cases. The Dakotas, Montana, and Wisconsin are leading the numbers of cases and deaths. Other states setting records include Colorado, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Nebraska, New Mexico, West Virginia, Ohio, and Wyoming. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is saying that herd immunity is achieved by protecting people from the virus, not by exposing them to it. Another reminder for us to continue practicing social distancing, wearing a mask, and hand washing. And on vaccine, Johnson & Johnson today paused its advanced clinical trial of its experimental coronavirus vaccine due to an unexplained illness in one of its volunteers. So what do we need to be careful about, and when can we expect the second surge of COVID-19 cases? Earlier today, we spoke with Dr. Tushar Patel, getting much insight into this novel virus and its spread. Here's what Dr. Tushar Patel shared with ITV Gold. President Donald Trump got COVID-19, and currently he's been said that he is recovered. He was on a monoclonal antibody that was given to him. Remdesivir was also given to him. What kind of insight could you tell us about President's treatment of COVID-19, and why is it that we have not gotten those, the public has not gotten those treatments? Your take on that.
So those medications, experimental antibody therapy, convalescent plasma treatment, remdesivir, those are not approved by FDA. So those are not approved for common individuals unless you are severely sick in the hospital setting. People like President or some politicians are able to get those medications or treatment. Common people who rely on the insurance company to approve, which is not FDA approved, it's going to be very challenging for common people to get those medications. He did get the right medications, and I assume he's doing well after only 3, 4, 5 days of medications, and he's back on road. So I think his disease Progression is probably in his favor right now. He's not getting any more complications. He did not develop pneumonia. So I'm pretty sure that he's responding well to the treatment.
You know, he's also out now and he's hosting rallies where most people are not wearing masks, or so it seems. Do you think that's a wise decision? Should he be distant away from people? Usually the quarantine is 2 weeks. I'm trying to understand how the president was allowed to just be free in 4 to 5 days.
Everyone should be following the recommendations by the CDC and the public health officials in this country. That includes the president. And I think he should not be doing large gatherings. He should not be doing the rallying, even though elections is only 2-3 weeks away. He should be more cautious. He should be helping our country to fight this pandemic. And I think it's very premature for him to start doing the rallies at this point.
This therapeutic that was used with him and the monoclonal antibody, do you see it as a potential treatment in the next coming months for the public?
It could be, however, that treatment right now is going to be very expensive. So I think when it time for people to get the medications or the treatment, it's all depending on the dollar value. So sometimes the insurance company weigh in, pharmaceutical companies weigh in, politicians weigh in. So it's very tough for us to tell right now that what treatment will work. Like I said previously, we need something like Tamiflu, which we use for influenza. If we have those kind of tablets or treatment available, 4 or 5 days of treatment, which is not very costly, should be very cost effective. Yes, those kind of treatments would be good for the therapeutics for the COVID-19 treatment.
Let's talk about vaccine real quick, doctor, and then we'll go into the surging cases, which is really concerning everyone around the nation. Johnson & Johnson trial has been paused in the US. AstraZeneca is still on a pause in the United States right now. What information could you give us about the vaccine treatments, and when could we expect this vaccination?
So the vaccine trials are going well, except the Johnson & Johnson has to pause late stage clinical trial for unexplained illness for one individual. So what happens with these clinical trials? These are given to thousands of people. When we are trying to have this vaccine for millions and millions of people, those multiply. So if only one individual get severe complications or unexplained illness, that is very challenging. Like I said before, it will take some time. In my calculations, my healthcare expertise, my public health expertise, my personal opinion is we will get the vaccination sometime spring, summer 2021.
A series of rapes committed on women from India's lowest caste are making national headlines across South Asia, fueling street protests and social media outrage since the death of a 19-year-old Dalit caste woman in New Delhi 2 weeks after she was allegedly gang raped by upper caste men from North Indian village of Hathras. Anger spilled even more when local police cremated her body in the middle of the night without her family present. Dalits have been one of India's most marginalized communities, with now more than 200 million residing in the nation, and the community faces much discrimination due to complex social hierarchy and patriarchy in rural India. On this and demanding justice for the Hathras rape and murder case, recently the Indian American Muslim Council in New Jersey held a protest rally with 9 organizations across the tri-state. According to Mohammed Jawad from the council, 8 Dalit women are raped every day in India. Here's what others had to say about Hathras rape and murder case.
We keep the victim in our prayers, in our mind, and may God make it easy for the family of the victim who has gone a tremendous ordeal. And something when I was starting to research a little bit more and more, I really got emotional. So I could only imagine what the family and the mother went through. With all that had happened. So, may God bless the girl, our sister, and her family who really went through a really hard deal. So, if everything is okay, I think we should get started. So, I want to invite Samia Khan, who's going to be reciting a few verses of the Quran, and this followed by a translation by Sister Dua.
We are well aware of the pandemic of sexual violence and caste-based violence against Dalit communities in India. We gather here today as a community of human rights defenders, and we condemn the rapid increase in the unacceptable social condition of Dalit women unable to defend rights to our own bodies and self-respect. We are repeatedly devalued, raped, and mutilated. Just a few days ago, it was yet another gruesome death following a horrific rape and torture of one of us, an innocent young Dalit girl in Hathras, UP. It is no coincidence that the predators are upper caste and male. They calculatedly chose to perform this cultural ritual of rape, continuing as a habituated caste-based sexual assertion of masculinity rooted in a tradition of punishing the other. We strongly condemn such a pattern of horror structurally backed by state actors and political leaders. We mourn with the grieving family and friends who are left daughterless, powerless, and speechless. We are outraged by the police burning her body as a Dalit woman who did not deserve even a loving goodbye from her family. Their motive was to burn evidence. We demand justice for this crime and oppose the UP government's audacity to protect the four predators just because they are Thakurs. In 2018, almost 3,000 Dalit women were raped in UP, of whom 871 were minors. On an average, 8 Dalit women are raped every day in India. Justice will begin to rise on the horizon when caste-based names, identities, rhetoric, and pride are destroyed.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mohammed Jawad. I'm the National General Secretary of Indian American Muslim Council. Obviously, this event was organized by a lot of coalition partners headed by Indian American Muslim Council. We want to, voice our opinion here, and we want to basically, give a justice to sister who got raped there. Obviously, there are too many incidents happening in India, and the government of India has to take action against the perpetrators. Even though the perpetrators are from upper caste, the girl who was brutally raped, and we know the story, what happened. And I think, as you see, there are so many coalition partners here from different faiths, different religion, Hindus, Christians, Dalits, you name it. Basically, everybody came out over the weekend and in this weather here from in America, in New Jersey, to voice against atrocities, what happened. And the way the government of India, the government of Uttar Pradesh is trying to hide the events and try to blame on international conspiracy or trying to blame the parents of the victim. I think it's horrible. It's horrible. They need to come up clean, and the justice have to be served. I think we're all fighting for justice. We're all here to see how we can serve the justice, and we want to let the government of India and Uttar Pradesh know they need to basically get their act together and to get some justice to the innocent girls' parents there. I think that's all. Again. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajaji and ITV Gold, for covering this message for us. And we are here in New Jersey, the place we call Oak Tree Road, the heart and mind of all the Indians here. We have gathered here a big coalition of all the organizations, Hindus for Human Rights, the Dalit Solidarity Foundation, the JIPA, the SAHI, and all the organizations, including organized by the Indian American Muslim Council and Indian American Muslim Council. Basically wanted to bring up and highlight the issue that India is facing at this time, especially when it comes to situation of lawlessness, injustice. So we firmly believe that India is almost there. This is our century, as we have always been telling Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, Mr. Modi. We have always been announcing, and this is the time. But situation like this, from here, from this land of Edison, New Jersey, and Oak Tree Road, we want to send a message to you, the Yogi government there. Please take care of getting justice delivered to the victim family, and make sure that we really thrive as a unified India. We do not want to break India into pieces. We want to see them all together. Actually, that is the message back home. And as soon as that is done, I'm sure we will be back on track. Actually,
My name is Nilab Nusrat. I am from Afghanistan, and I represent Hindus for Human Rights. Human for Human Rights co-founder Sunita is my godmother. I'm here today because I'm sick of governments like India and Afghanistan use rape as a weapon of war. I'm here today because I can't take it anymore. I can't stay silent
when a 19-year girl is gang raped and killed, and the rapists are not brought to justice because they're from an upper caste. I'm enraged and disgusted that the Indian government calls itself a democracy while it turns a blind eye to murder and rape of minorities. It's our moral and societal duty to stand up against oppression and demand justice for our 19-year-old Dalit sister. I'm here today to stand in solidarity with my Hindu, Muslim, Dalit, and Christian brothers and sisters in India. Thank you.
It's time for a short break. Stay with us in Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. We'll be right back. And welcome back. This is Vision of Asia, the South Asian news segment, and I am Aditi Lamba. The International Refugee Assistance Project works towards enforcing a set of legal and human rights for refugees and displaced persons, serving the world's most persecuted individuals by mobilizing direct legal aid, litigation, and systemic advocacy. The project believes that everyone should have a safe place to live and a safe way to get there. On that, recently, the International Refugee Assistance Project hosted a newsmakers briefing on the state of refugee resettlement and asylum in the U.S., in which the team of ITV Gold also participated. The discussion saw key members of the project discussing the challenges and push against refugees and asylum seekers this year and what is being done to counter the trend. Here is the story.
This is critical, not only because this is a part of the American immigration policies, which have been changing dramatically under the Trump administration, but it's also a timely topic. Normally, the U.S. president is supposed to announce the quota for the next fiscal year of how many refugees we're going to accept in the next year. So the next fiscal year starts on October 1st. Today is September 29th, and there's still no words. So potentially, there could be breaking news at any moment. But there is still some certainty in this news. Under Trump, the number of refugees the U.S. is taking in has been dropping a lot. Specifically from 85,000 to 18,000 this year. So if everything goes following this trend, the number will still be even less. So how would this affect the refugees and asylum seekers in this country, and how would this affect the reputation and the values that American people are holding?
I mean, even more pressing, maybe one can say, is the new year, 2021, for the United States starts on October 1st, this week. Before the year begins, the president is supposed to set the goal, the target for the coming year. The president has not done that yet. Before he does that, he's supposed to, by law, he's required to consult with Congress to come up with the target. He has not consulted with Congress yet. So what that tells us is probably, or most likely this week, he will not meet the requirement by law to consult with Congress and set a presidential determination or target for how many refugees can come to the U.S. in 2021. Unless he makes this determination, unless he makes this presidential determination, there can be no refugees admitted into the United States.
So I've worked with an Iraqi family who had to flee Iraq due to their affiliations with the US Army. So this case, we started working on it in early 2017, and the case got submitted in the year 2017. They got interviewed by the US officials at the end of the year 2018, and they have not received a decision for their interview yet to this point. So they've been in the process for about 3 years, and there are still multiple steps to be taken for them to get resettled. So even these steps are potentially going to take many years. And how long they're going to take completely depends on future policies that the US take.
I was wondering if you could talk about the situation that is facing asylum seekers who are already in the U.S. My understanding is that even before some of the most recent changes in the judicial process of dealing with asylum applications went into effect, that it was something like a 13% approval rating in the administrative courts that were dealing with these cases, and my sense is that number is even lower now. So I was wondering if you could talk about what has happened in terms of slowing down the process of evaluating and approving asylum applications.
Over the last 4 years, those backlogs have increased exponentially. So if you apply for asylum now, generally there is a good chance that you will have to wait years for a resolution to your case. There have been some processing changes to try to get at that. But in some, we can just say backlogs have increased exponentially. In terms of approval rates, there's also a variety, or the approval rate for who gets granted asylum does depend on the office, because an office, for example, the office in Houston has a much lower asylum grant rate than the office in San Francisco.
Who are the most vulnerable communities seeking asylum right now? And if I was to ask you what is the greatest need of the hour there, what would you say?
So over the last 5 years, for example, in the affirmative asylum backlog, Venezuelans fleeing the crisis in Venezuela have made a huge percentage of the pending cases in the United States. On the flip side, in the refugee pipeline, as Rayed mentioned, you see people fleeing the Syrian refugee crisis, or the Syrian crisis, as some of the largest numbers of refugees in the world. So those are kind of like the larger numbers.
And that is all for tonight's show. Remember to send us your suggestions and get your voices and organizations in our show. Email us on events@itvgold.com or follow us on Facebook at itvgold. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch many of our popular shows for free. Thank you for joining us tonight from Queens, New York. This is Vision of Asia, and I am Aditi Lamba. Take care and be well.